Hello, thanks for joining me today. Welcome, and welcome to any replay viewers as well. Same topic as every day. So, living through a pandemic whilst various corrupt governments around the world are insufficiently addressing the problems and are not doing everything that's within their power to do to help flatten the curve, save hospital systems from overwhelm, protect healthcare professionals, and preserve the lives of their citizens and of the economic interactions that help feed, clothe, and house their citizens. So by delaying action, you increase the severity of the impact, because proactive shutdowns do more to lessen the economic burden than delayed, equivocating, potentially sabotage level responses, such as Donald Trump's don't test, don't tell policy, and the Australian government's policy of delaying payments to people until the 27th of April so they can pretend that they're not currently in a recession, because Australia is in a recession. Growth was already slowing. Business investment was lower. Because what hyper-capitalists forget, or vulture capitalists or under-regulated capitalists, whatever term we use, forget is that what principally drives the economy is demand, and that is consumer demand. Consumer demand is the engine of 70% of economic transactions within a nation. So just to remind us of the kind of suffering undergone by health professionals, 2 weeks in the future for America and potentially 2 or 3 weeks for Australia, there's some footage of a doctor in Spain explaining that they have to, by policy now, take respirators away from people over 75 and give them to younger patients, because capacity for intensive care unit beds has been significantly exceeded, so they have to apply these cutoffs. And the emotional toll that that's taking on healthcare professionals, whose guiding motto is first do no harm, whose Hippocratic oath guides them to always be looking out for treating people, to have to apply an arbitrary cutoff to people over a certain age, give them morphine or sedatives, and leave them to die without the respiratory help that they need to survive this virus is hard to watch. So I know that footage like this will come soon from American doctors, who is brave enough to go on camera with this admission that they are having to remove ventilators from people over a certain age. But for now, let's listen and watch this Spanish doctor, because we don't understand Spanish, but we do understand a medical professional in severe emotional distress. So here's someone who presumably does understand Spanish, tells us that, yes, they're saying people over 75 must have their respirators removed to give it to the younger people suffering. Seniors are sedated so they don't suffer. So there's already 1 million views. Let's have a look.
En el que se está diciendo, hola, buenos días.
Hello, good day. Yes.
Me cuesta transmitir mucho este mensaje, se me están cayendo las lágrimas. Me han llegado ya un par de audios en el que se está diciendo que personas mayores de 65 años les están quitando los respiradores en Madrid y las están sedando para que mueran, porque no hay respiradores para todos y se los quieren dar a los más jóvenes. Os pongo el audio, a ver si me puedo tranquilizar, y después haré los comentarios pertinentes. Por favor, escucharlo y compartir este vídeo en todas las redes sociales. Tenemos un deber con esta nación y con nuestros mayores, y no les podemos dejar morir de esta manera tan indigna. No podemos.
So I just wanted to listen to his story because of the emotional impact of seeing human beings. So we can read the studies, we can hear about the numbers, we can look at graphs which show us the exponential trajectory of diagnosed cases and also deaths, and see that what's happening is devastating for the people of this world. And yes, the disease is worse for wealthy countries at this present moment, because of the nature of international travel. If you're wealthy, you can travel backwards and forwards. You can have higher numbers of people per capita traveling in and out of the country. And international travel is a vector for the spread of this highly contagious, high virality virus that 20% of the cases are severe, and a smaller subset of those cases need respiratory assistance for 1 to 3 weeks. And the fact that if you contract this disease and you need respiratory care in hospitals where the hospital systems are overwhelmed, if you exceed a certain age limit, you'll be left to die in a corridor with a sedative and a painkiller. And that's decades of existence that is being taken from you by the murderous malpractice of the Trump administration, who delayed testing, who refused to accept tests from the WHO, from the World Health Organization, whose CDC tests were flawed initially. And there was no apparent hurry, and there still is no apparent hurry. Trump continues to talk about how he's activated the DPA, the Defense Production Act, but still hasn't, still stands at a podium and lies to the public about millions of tests being on their way. We can watch evidence of that because Project Lincoln has done a great job of compiling evidence of Trump administration promises and the fact that they haven't been delivered on yet. Let's have a look at the Lincoln Project. Their ads are very potent. Whoa. Yep. And Republican senators put forward a bill that gives a $500 billion blank check to the corrupt treasurer, Steven Mnuchin, and allows him to just disperse that as he wishes, i.e. bail out all of Trump hotels, etc., whilst giving lesser amounts to people who pay less in taxes. So if your tax return says you haven't paid a lot, then you only get a little bit of relief payment. So means testing, relief payments so that you get less the less you have, whilst giving corporations who pay very little in tax, if anything at all, more money, because it's a product of libertarian style thinking that says corporations are everything and people are nothing. And the critical error that's being made is people are not nothing. People are consumer demand, and those who pursue a framing of economics that obscures the role of the consumer and the consumer having some money, they're like communists. Communists forget the role of competitiveness in human striving and human endeavor and human success as individuals, but also as nations. And hyper-capitalists, vulture capitalists, predatory capitalists, that's a good term, obscure the nature of economics, which is people buy things. When people don't have money to buy things, the economy grinds slowly to a halt. So it's predicted that the unemployment rate will rise to at least 30%. And the highest unemployment rate in the Great Depression was 25.9%, apparently. So let's see, how big are you seeing this? Okay, that big. All right. I'm still trying to find an ad. But Project Lincoln, what if I find a video? This is the video. Okay, one of the videos. Let's watch that.
Going to be just fine.
You never heard of this. All of a sudden.
No words about a pandemic at this point?
No, we're not at all. And we have it totally under control. They're going to be just fine.
You never heard of this. All of a sudden, it's got the world aflutter.
We only have 11 cases, and they're all getting better. This is their new hoax.
We have lost nobody.
Whatever happens, we're totally prepared.
States and cities across the nation have shut down restaurants and bars.
Oh, we pretty much shut it down.
And another brutal day on Wall Street.
Press is in hysteria mode. I didn't do it. I don't know anything about it.
The U.S. is under a national state of emergency.
We did shut it down, yes.
The number of confirmed cases continues to surge.
I think that we're doing a great job.
Hastily arranged airport screenings.
Take it easy. Just relax.
We have to know what the denominator is.
Anybody that wants a test can get a test.
Heat kills this virus.
We don't have enough tests.
And I think it's going to all work out fine.
I don't take responsibility at all.
The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
The words about a
So that's put together by Never Trump Republicans. That's who forms the Project Lincoln Group. And I wouldn't necessarily trust them, except that they are my allies now in a war against deception, criminality, and malfeasance that is killing people and will kill millions of people. So yes, I trust the Project Lincoln Group because they know how to appeal to conservative-minded people. They know how to appeal to people who intuitively suspect the Democrats of not understanding the value of money or the value of business or the value of an economy. Sometimes political parties get polarized, and I think America has sometimes lurched so far to the right that in trying to hold the line, Democrats can sound like they don't value businesses as much, but they do, because businesses are life. Businesses employ people, and employed people pay for their family, for food to put on their family's table. So yes, but it's all just a question of differentially organizing priorities. And the Republican Party forgets, ignores, overlooks, and demeans wage earners to such a significant extent that they hurt the economy and that they hurt the American people. So I have a commentator called Peter who's saying he's at that point of putting your head in the sand altogether. Well, this broadcast is supposed to be the antidote to that. Do not put your head in the sand. Your community, your fellow men and women need you and need all of us more than ever before. Everything that makes us anxious should still be counted as a plus in terms of it's better to be anxious than it is to be complacent. Complacent people at this point in history are dangerous. Complacent people are more likely to do the wrong thing, to spread the virus, to vote for Republicans, to endanger everybody. Republicans are in power because people are too used to trusting Republicans and trusting religious leaders to do the right thing and to have shared values that promote the fabric of society and families and social cohesion. And that trust was misplaced, and here we are. Because Hollywood was people who like Hollywood were too complacent in thinking that our value system was winning the cultural moment. Well, not enough people were voting in midterm elections, and Republicans were winning the war of governance and getting too many people locked into local government and state government positions where they then helped control or work together with Fox News propaganda to brainwash Americans into thinking that if you just take care of corporations, everything else falls into place. And that's what the bill that the Senate Republicans are trying to pass is about. Look after corporations and just trust that everything else will fall into place. So people might get a $1,000 relief check, and they won't get the sustained ongoing payments that they need to help them survive this moment in time and continue to be productive members of society and consumers that will drive consumer demand and help keep America out of a spiraling depression. So America is being flushed down the toilet by Senate Republicans, and at least America got out and voted in the 2018 midterm elections. So there's hope that the Democrats will be able to block the Senate bill, at least try to minimize the political damage that Republicans will use that blocking power to try to accomplish, because they're all on Twitter right now, Republicans saying, oh, look at terrible Democrats blocking this relief bill that doesn't actually deliver very much relief at all to working Americans, and instead buys their corporate crony business owner pals a lot of money and a blank check for $500 billion to Mnuchin to give to Trump businesses and Trump donor businesses. So if you're on the poverty line, you will get nothing, which will lead to death, disability, and mass suffering on the part of lower income earners in America, which will affect demand. And that's what Republicans always forget, that consumer demand drives the economy. And if you negate the value and the worth of human beings who happen to have less money, if you're so attached to the prosperity gospel that you treat the impoverished as people who have been denied God's blessing, and so should be denied the blessing of government assistance, then you don't understand how economies work, and you don't understand that for economies to succeed, you need as many people on board as consumers as you can, and leaving people to die in the ditch is chopping off a whole section, a whole strata of potential consumers. So that economic framing of just considering people to have worth if they have enough money to be over the poverty line, even people below the poverty line still consume products, and if they're left to die, not only is it a moral travesty, it's also economic illiteracy, because you need people out of the gutter for communities to flourish, not only as an ethical part of life, but as an economic part of life. So disabled retirees, people who've just lost their jobs and won't be getting healthcare through their jobs anymore, people whose industries have just been wiped out on the basis of the shutdowns that are necessary to try and minimize deaths from coronavirus and minimize hospital overwhelms, minimize overturning of your hospital system. Societies can't easily function without hospitals either. People won't feel safe to leave their home if they know there's no hospital bed for their child if they fall down in the park and break something. People won't feel safe to go about their daily lives if there are no hospital beds, because hospital beds are full of sick and dying people, and capacity has been so significantly exceeded because of lack of preparation from the federal government, lack of interest in ordering the needed protective equipment for hospital workers, and lack of gowns, lack of masks, and lack of ventilators and respirators. So yes, you need a stimulus from the bottom up. Australia successfully avoided a recession in the global financial crisis in 2009. And they did this. They had a motto: go early, go hard, go household. So they understood that you give stimulus to the people who will spend it, who won't spend it on stock buybacks, but will spend it on consumer items. The government of Australia gave every consumer, every Australian citizen, $900. And they didn't wait for bureaucracy to interfere. They gave it to them regardless of whether they were in the country or not, because they understood that the bulk of recipients would be in the country, that it needed to go out fast, and it needed to go to households who would treat that $900 unexpected windfall as money to be spent, and that would buoy the economy, and that would lift consumer confidence, and that would sustain businesses during a challenging time at a global level. And Australia was one of the few developed nations around the world that did not succumb to the downward pull of a recession during that time. So that's the example that should be followed by leaders now. The new Australian Conservative government isn't following that example. Their relief payments to people are only becoming available from the 27th of April. It's disgusting, because people who live from paycheck to paycheck and people who have just lost their jobs will be hungry now, will be in penury now. And what will they eat for a month until April the 27th? And how will they keep their electricity on until the 27th of April? And so very similar pattern followed by Senate Republicans who want to pass bills that don't help people out that need help, and don't help people when they need help. So I'll go back to my own Twitter account, because I've saved information from Democratic politicians. And that's an important, actually what I might do is get rid of that. Oh, it is off the screen. I'm just going to scroll down. Okay, yes, a $500 billion slush fund using taxpayer money with no real strings attached and no real benefit to the public, which amounts to a blank check for Donald Trump. That's bad. In Denmark, let's have a look at what Denmark are doing. Okay. In Denmark, the government is paying 75% of wages if employers keep workers on the books and suspending mutual obligations for people claiming unemployment benefits. So they are freezing the economy to try and keep it on ice whilst the virus works its way through the population, because it will. But if we slow it, then people can get life-sustaining treatment, as opposed to people falling outside of that finite amount of hospital bed capacity, intensive unit capacity, ventilator capacity. So Denmark has gone big, very big, to defeat the unprecedented challenge of coronavirus. So private companies have been told by the Danish government that they're going to pay 75% of their employee salaries to avoid mass layoffs. So 13% of the national economy could be spent by the government in 3 months. 2.5 trillion stimulus, very big. They understand. Denmark will do better than other economies then. The US faces the sharpest economic downturn in a century, and statistics that seem impossibly pessimistic one moment look positively optimistic hours later. That's how rapidly this is going downhill, and yet we've known for a while. I have a Twitter thread that I was sharing with people on the 7th of March, and I'll find it now. So we can look at what I was getting upset about on the 7th of March, so that we can say, yep, people were warned, people knew, and Trump, who would have had briefings about the severity of the virus. All right. So if I send this to myself now, then I'll be able to share it with you all now. Okay. Hello, Pumpkin. Okay. Thanks for your patience. Share screen. All right. So March the 7th, 2020. People haven't run the numbers yet. Yes, there were 2,000 cases in the US in a conservative estimate on March the 6th. And that was multiplying the number of confirmed lab diagnosed cases by 8. But they knew there was substantial underreporting because of the widespread lack of tests. Even now, you can't get tested unless you've been in contact with a positive case, with a confirmed positive case, or traveled to a determined hotspot, or have symptoms occasioning commitment to hospital, to probably an intensive care unit. So looking at 1 million US cases by the end of April, 2 million by May, 4 million by May, 2 million by May the 5th, 4 million by May 11th, and so on. Exponentials are hard to grasp, but this is how they go. As the healthcare system begins to saturate under this caseload, it will become increasingly hard to detect, track, and contain new transmission chains. In absence of extreme interventions, this likely won't slow significantly until hitting more than 1% of the susceptible population. What does a caseload of this size mean for healthcare systems? We'll examine just 2 factors: hospital beds and masks. The US has 2.8 hospital beds per 1,000 people. With a population of 330 million, this is about 1 million beds. At any given time, 65% of those beds are already occupied. That leaves about 330,000 beds available nationwide. Perhaps a bit fewer this time of year with regular flu season, etc. So let's trust Italy's numbers and assume that about 10% of cases are serious enough to require hospitalization. And keep in mind that for many patients, hospitalization lasts for weeks. In other words, turnover will be very slow as beds fill with COVID-19 patients. By this estimate, by about May the 8th, all hospital beds in the US will be filled. If we're wrong by a factor of 2 regarding the fraction of severe cases, that only changes the timeline of bed saturation by 6 days in either direction. If 20% of cases require hospitalization, we run out of beds by May the 2nd. As the healthcare system becomes increasingly burdened, therapy shortages, etc., people with chronic conditions that are normally well managed may find themselves slipping into severe states of medical distress, requiring intensive care and hospitalization. But let's ignore that for now. All right, that's beds. So now masks. The feds say we have a national stockpile of 12 million N95 masks and 30 million surgical masks, which are not ideal but better than nothing. There are about 18 million healthcare workers in the US. Let's assume only 6 million healthcare workers are working on any given day. As COVID-19 cases saturate virtually every state and county, which seems likely to happen, it will soon be irresponsible for all healthcare workers to not wear a mask. These healthcare workers would burn through the N95 stockpile in 2 days if each healthcare worker only got 1 mask per day. Now we know they're being asked to wash their masks, which would typically be discarded because it's not really possible to perfectly sanitize such a mask. The 1 per day would neither be sanitary nor pragmatic, although that is indeed what we saw in Wuhan in China, with healthcare workers collapsing on their shift from dehydration because they were trying to avoid changing their personal protective equipment suits as they cannot be reused. So imagine being a healthcare worker on your feet all day and not taking a drink because it would contaminate your hands if you took off your suit to be able to drink something. How quickly could we ramp up production of new masks? Well, she says not very fast at all. Other people on Twitter I can see are begging billionaires to step in, and some billionaires are saying that they'll change their manufacturing to make masks. But the president of the United States is still just waiting to see how things go before he activates or uses the DPA Act of 1950, the Defense Production Act, to command manufacturers to do that. And once you do that, then you're making those manufacturers know that, yes, there is a guaranteed market for their product, that they need to make those things and make them now, and the federal government will purchase them. Keep in mind that all countries globally will be going through the same exact crises and shortages simultaneously. Now consider how these 2 factors, masks and bed shortages, compound each other's severity. Full hospitals and few masks and healthcare workers running around between beds without proper personal protective equipment equals a very bad mix. Healthcare workers are already getting infected, even with full access to protective gear. In the face of protective gear limitations this severe, it's only a matter of time. Healthcare workers will start dropping from the workforce for weeks at a time, leading to a shortage of healthcare workers that then further compounds both issues above. We could go on and on about thousands of factors, number of ventilators, or even simple things like saline drip bags. Importantly, I cannot stress this enough. Even if she's wrong, very wrong, about core assumptions like percentage of severe cases or the current case number, it only changes the timeline by days or weeks. This is how exponential growth in an immunologically naive population works. Hello, family.
Hello.
Hello, pumpkin. Hi, darling.
No, pretend I was the newborn baby. I'm playing box baby.
Oh, you're a newborn baby? Okay. Oh, hello, baby. Welcome to our family. Wow, you can already walk. That's so impressive.
Actually, I couldn't walk, but I could.
There you go.
So Tom is saying a vegan activist warned you about this as well. During the economic crash, you woke up one morning with a heavy portion of your superannuation gone. Yes. Could I have a glass of water too? With oh, super in Australia means superannuation. It's like your 401k. Yes, it's Australian. We call 401ks super or for superannuation, retirement funds that are government guaranteed. Yeah. All right. So that was a thread from the 7th of March by an engineer who did some calculations just on the numbers and understands enough about virality to know that exponential growth in a naive population is a curve like that, and that compounding factors of mask shortages, healthcare workers getting infected, shortages of beds make each problem worse. Lack of masks lead to more healthcare workers getting infected. More healthcare workers getting infected leads to a shortage of healthcare workers, but also to an increase in transmission amongst vulnerable people already in a hospital situation. And this will lead to a lack of treatment facilities for people with other conditions. So imagine being pregnant now and looking down the track to having a baby in a hospital system that on an exponential trajectory will be completely overwhelmed with infectious victims of this virus and infectious victims of government inaction and malpractice. So people do like things being positive, but it's important to hold governments accountable because we need them to do the right thing. And without outrage, without that prompting, motivating prompt, we're not going to get a ramping up of mask manufacturing. We're not going to get a ramping up of delivery of personal protective equipment to people at the coalface of fighting this virus and treating people and trying to stop they themselves from being a vector of infection themselves and transmitting the virus to more people. Because it's very possible to be an asymptomatic carrier of this as well. If your masks are inadequate, if the CDC is recommending that you just wear a bandana or a scarf because your hospital has run out of masks, then you could become infected by your patients and not even know it and infect all your other patients. China, when building hospitals, devoted some entirely to COVID patients, but to pre-existing hospitals, they would divide the hospitals in two and have COVID patients in one half and non-COVID patients in the other half, and have very strict protocols about crossing from one half to the other. Full taking off your gear under the eye of a trained nurse watching you to make sure you did it properly so that you didn't bring contamination from the very infectious half to those people with other conditions not related to the virus. And that would have saved the lives of pregnant people, stroke victims, heart attack victims, people having major surgery who didn't have the virus and who didn't need a respiratory infection compounding their situation. I mean, if you're in the middle of giving birth, you don't need to be exposed to an illness that has 20% of cases being very severe and a smaller proportion of that requiring outside external oxygenation from a source such as a respirator or a ventilator. So is there anything else that people would like me to cover today? Let's have a look. I might bring back Twitter just so we can go a little bit through the best of Twitter at present. Let's see. There's our Spanish doctor who is, as I said, crying from distress that he's having to comply with directives to remove ventilators from people over 65. Over 65. My father's not even answering the phone at the moment, and considering he got off a cruise ship less than 10 days ago, I'm like, oh, I hope he can still breathe. The good news about children, I mean, it's good news for children and for parents of small children, but it's even though there's evidence that children are infected by the disease, we can have a look at this study because it says there's they don't have a high viral load, but there's still nasopharyngeal swabs are showing up viral particles, and so is fecal swabs. So they're taking fecal swabs from children, but even when viral particles are present, none of the children who were studied had symptoms that had drawn them to the attention of health authorities. They were only being tested because of a family member who had tested positive. So if we look at the abstract, children are just as likely as adults to become infected with SARS-CoV-2. That's the official name for COVID-19 in academic journals, because that's the history of it. It's a version of the coronavirus, yes. But they're less likely to be symptomatic or develop severe symptoms. Many children affected by novel coronaviruses are asymptomatic. The majority of children infected by novel coronaviruses have a documented household contact, often showing symptoms before them. So the children don't show symptoms until after the adult's already showing symptoms. In contrast, adults more often have a nosocomial exposure. I better look up that word. I knew it once. Nosocomial definition. All right. Oh, originating in a hospital. Yes, Pumpkin? You want something to eat? What do you want to eat? Raspberries? Okay, ask your brother. Sweetheart, could you help your sister get some frozen raspberries? Because your mum is broadcasting. Oh, Enlighten Up's making a great point that she loves the 2019 part of the name for those who claim we didn't know about it until this year. Yes, we knew about it. The disease has 2019 as part of its name. That's my cheeky girl. She's doing really well with homeschooling. I'm going to boast about my child and say she's been learning to read and write some words. And she writes me little letters. She just needs to know how to spell dear. It's actually, I'll tell you now, it's D-E-A-R for dear. I get all these letters that say D-I-R. Dear Mummy. What are you doing? Are you trying to be in the video? All right. Okay, so nosocomial means obtained in the hospital. So, oh, you can't see the, sorry, you couldn't see the study that I was reading. Okay, here we go. I'll scroll back up to the headline so you can see what I'm looking at. Coronavirus infections in children, including COVID-19.
Mommy, now can I see?
Okay, so yes, here it confirms the 2019 novel coronavirus. Can't do that. You can wave hello, I don't mind that. Is causing a severe outbreak of the disease termed COVID-19 in China and multiple other countries, threatening a global pandemic. So that's because this was published on the 12th of March before the World Health Organization determined that this was now a global pandemic. So adults more often have a hospital-related exposure. Okay. I want to read the whole article.
Can't do. Because it would take too long. It would probably be nighttime by then.
My daughter just said, I can't read the whole article because it will take too long. It'll probably be nighttime by then. Oh, well. Anyway, what I'm taking away from that study, don't be too distracting. I don't mind you waving, but don't get right in front of my face, okay? Go ask your brother to help with the raspberries. And you can tell him that he can have a sticker if he's helpful. That's not nice, sweetheart. I need that. Go ask him. Remember? He can get a sticker and you'll...
But he didn't do it.
Yeah, but go ask him. Have you told him that he'll get a sticker yet? That's a new development.
Why? Get a sticker?
Yeah, and then you could get a sticker too if you do something helpful as well. So why don't you go think of something helpful?
No, I don't want. Well, I get a sticker if I tell him to do it without doing anything else. So I don't have to ask you to do anything.
Okay, that's a good idea.
So didn't do I get a sticker?
Yep.
So you're not supposed to get
Okay.
Can you get me some
Oops.
photographs?
My lady, sweetheart, go over there.
Sweetheart.
Sweetheart, stop talking. You have to go over there to talk to me. My son's also been very good at homeschooling as well, and he's doing lots of progress with maths. Children enjoy hearing that you think well of their efforts. It's good for them.
What can I do
All right.
now? Okay, I will.
Thanks, precious. All right.
So you're pouring them into the bowl.
Sweetheart, you have to put them into a bowl.
Okay, then.
So, this is an important point from, who's this guy? Scott Gottlieb. He is a contributor to CNBC, the commissioner of the US FDA from 2017 to 2019. All right. In order to contain the epidemic, we need broad screening. People are much more likely to self-isolate with a positive result. Asking people to presume they're positive is not sufficient. Limiting testing to inpatient settings only is an indication we still don't have sufficient capacity. So yes, testing capacity needs to step up. My listeners are talking about how they'll get a sticker as well. That's funny. I'll share with you all some footage of Italian mayors. Mayors, how do you pronounce it in America? Italian mayors who are being cranky with their constituents for not heeding the warnings to stay inside. So we'll have a quick listen. Tell me if you can or cannot hear the sound.
Mandiamo I carabinieri, ma li mandiamo con il lanciafiamme.
Che domani ti becco, domani, non pensiate tra anni, domani. Sono il sindaco, sul mio territorio non si aspetta. Non vi posso impedire formalmente di uscire da casa? Bene, vi impedisco di passare sul suolo pubblico.
Ora mi rivolgo a voi, ma dove cazzo andate? Dove andate con questi cani che hanno la prostata infiammata?
E voi, non è previsto il ping-pong? Lo potete giocare a ping-pong, andiamo? Alla PlayStation. Siccome io sono il sindaco di questa città, in questa città il decreto lo faccio rispettare io. Quindi se ne deve andare a casa adesso, non voglio...
Can you hear it?
Tutti, dovete stare tutti a casa. Deve andare... Non si può stare in mezzo alla strada, come ve lo devo spiegare? Non si può stare. A casa. La mazza, le fidanzate con la mazza ci vogliono.
Ste cazzo di parrucchiere che vanno in casa a aggiustare i capelli e fette, a che cazzo servono? Cioè, ma l'avete capito che tu chiudono? L'avete capito che chi cazzo ti andava per questi capelli aggiustati in Utavu?
Ho incontrato un nostro concittadino che amabilmente faceva la corsetta su e giù per la strada, accompagnato da un cane visibilmente stremato. L'ho fermato e gli ho detto: guarda che questo non è un film, tu non sei Will Smith in Io sono leggenda, quindi passa a casa.
So how good was that? You are not Will Smith in I Am Legend. Go home. So that's an important public health message that I wanted to share with you all. I'll just ask my husband what he's doing. Honey, I don't want to eat sausages again. Excellent. Thank you, sweetheart.
How about some burritos?
We can't, sadly. I looked it up, just can't. All right, so I hope everybody enjoyed that. And you can look it up and share it yourself on the internet if you go to that account. She tweeted it out. Oops, to see that account, that's the account, Rumpf Shaker. So if you want to share that, although it's also on my Twitter page as well. I know this is stepping off the topic of COVID-19, which is perpetually the topic of the moment, but I just wanted to remind people about fossil fuel subsidies, because I think if people realized how much public money was going towards propping up fossil fuel industries, they would be far less complacent about governments denying subsidies to renewable energies purely because they are backed by executives and lobbyists who are trying to promote and increase the profit margins and save fossil fuel industries that are dying at a rational level because people are rejecting the idea of having their future and their children's future compromised by a continuation of the practice of burning fossil fuels and filling the air with gases that rise and form a blanket layer around the earth, trapping additional heat so that we warm not only by 1 degree or 1.5 degrees, but potentially even by 2, up to 4, and increasingly more degrees than that. Although by the time you get to 4, actually, sure, then human activity and the human ability to generate fossil fuels will have ceased, but we're very close to that tipping edge point of causing the Earth to release its own buried climate gases, buried stores. We're thawing out things so much so that thawed lakes of frozen methane, allowing the methane to bubble up and out and be released into the atmosphere. We are prompting the Earth to start contributing as much or even more than we already are, contributing through the mechanism of industrialization and fossil fuel use to releasing gases that cook us, that cook human life, that cook our agricultural systems, that will potentially lead to food shortages, widespread crop failures in as little as 5 to 10 years. So we'll deal with the coronavirus now, but that is also the problem for us to deal with now in this window, because even as we're distracted by a pandemic, this is still a pressing problem for all of us who care about living more than just a few hedonistic years. 5.2 trillion for global fossil fuel subsidies. Don't forget that figure, 5.2 trillion, and 29 billion in merely Australia alone. So I always want people to know that, because it's a very underreported on fact. And once people even start to be interested in that or intrigued by that and look into it themselves and find their own pathways to confirmation of that enormous public expenditure, involuntary, unconscious public expenditure on industries that are occasioning the death of all of us. First, impoverished people, but not too soon after, wealthier people as well. So for us to just think we can look the other way while Bangladesh floods, should look at Australia, which has suffered from massive property destroying, mass animal extinguishing bushfires, killed over 1 billion animals, destroyed over 1,000 homes, poisoned the lungs of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of Australians. And the ongoing effects of being exposed to months of bushfire smoke are under-researched, obviously. You can't have a double-blind randomized trial of who gets exposure to bushfire smoke and who doesn't. So it will take a while of longitudinal study, but difficult to make that research comparison. Still, we know We know that pollution, exposure to air pollution, is associated with high incidence of neurological diseases such as Parkinson's and dementia, and that children who are exposed to high levels of pollution, air pollution, have higher rates of asthma, other respiratory problems, etc., and high incidence of respiratory diseases. Because when you have compromised lung function already from pollutants sticking in your lungs, sticking to the tacky surfaces of your alveoli, it's easier for germs to also get a foothold and wreak havoc on your compromised respiratory function. So yes, it hurts the children who are through environmentally expressed racism, who are living closer to factory outlets, because people go, yep, more people of color there, will build our factories there, where people have less political power and less organized infrastructure of speaking out. And those poorer people, those disenfranchised people, their children suffer first. But as Republicans continue and conservatives continue to gain power, they expose more and more children to air pollution and water pollution. So it is no point presuming that white privilege will protect us from these negative consequences, which are increasingly being distributed to everyone. Hi, Paul. Someone's asking me if I have any evidence of lung damage. So is it evidence of lung damage associated with exposure to bushfire smoke? Evidence. Or just pollution in general? Let's go lung damage evidence from pollution. Yes, research suggests that long-term exposure to air pollution can contribute to the development of some lung conditions. There's good evidence that outdoor air pollution contributes to lung cancer, and it's possible that long-term exposure to air pollution is linked to the development of asthma. There's a study from the British government, I'll link to now. Pulmonary health effects, and pulmonary means lung-related effects of air pollution. Considerable, I better show you guys so you can see as well. So exposure to air pollution is the 9th leading risk factor for cardiopulmonary mortality. Considerable past evidence suggests that air pollution is an important factor that enhances pulmonary disease, whilst also causing greater harm in susceptible populations, such as children, the elderly, and those of low socioeconomic status worldwide. Asthma, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, which is COPD, lung cancer, and respiratory infections all seem to be exacerbated due to exposure to a variety of environmental air pollutants, with the greatest effects due to particulate matter. And bushfire smoke is comprised of particulate matter because it's finally burnt ash from burnt trees and cars and property. Ozone and nitrogen oxides. New publications reviewed affirm these findings. Continued vigilance will be essential to lessen the effects of air pollution on human health and pulmonary disease. Cooperation at a multinational level will be required. Yes, pompous stuff, but that's what academic publications have to be. All right. So somebody's disputing my evidence. What would London know about bushfires? They don't have them. That was just reporting on particulate matter pollution. And if you don't know that bushfire smoke is comprised of particulate matter, you can go in and try and increase your knowledge base until you do know that bushfire smoke is comprised of fine particulate matter, even more dangerous because of its extreme fineness. Are you guys good? Okay. So he's moved the goalpost to say, okay, he's not asking anymore about evidence that pollution causes lung problems and increases pulmonary disease. He's now saying, okay, yes, but forget about that problem that I just asked you for evidence for. A simple thank you would suffice, dear sir. But yes, the pandemic does compel our attention. But I nevertheless brought up other problems which continue to proceed apace and also have an exponentially increasing danger to the human race. So people in my comment section are discussing something that they heard a podcast on Radiolab. Are we talking about emotions and nervous conditions can affect 3 generations down? Yes, I'm a granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor, and I would say that whatever epigenetic science is coming up with about there being an inherited effect of exposure to massive trauma is likely to have truth to it. And I've seen people take issue with the fact that I often liken the Trump administration to Nazis. And they either don't think the parallels are applicable, or they don't think it's as applicable as I find it. And I would like to point out that I would like to just ask, who thinks that there won't be mass graves dug for those who are suffering from the coronavirus, the novel coronavirus, now in the detention facilities organized by the Trump administration, where over 70,000 people are being held in cramped, unhygienic conditions, many without adequate access to soap or blankets or sleep or nutrition, people who are being fed inadequately thawed burritos, people who had to have visits from nutritionists to insist that children be given at least a spoonful of applesauce a day for nutritional intake because they weren't being given any fruit or vegetables in their government-administered diet or their private prison diet. So who thinks that people in those detention centers will receive adequate care when there's already shortages of masks, ventilators, and hospital beds for American citizens, and the American hospital systems are going to be overwhelmed? So who here, anybody here, doesn't believe that there will be mass pits dug to throw the bodies of migrants who are going to be incidental victims of the Trump administration's murderously callous attitude towards migrants who sought to find safety in accordance with American laws? So they're not illegals. People who approached the border and asked for asylum have also been thrown into detention center prisons, along with everybody else who has just sought safety by trying to cross the border into a wealthy country where many undocumented migrants are employed and still manage to pay taxes, even without a social security number, but have tax deducted from their paychecks and contribute to the American economy. Nevertheless, anybody caught, detained, and put in a prison camp, either run by a Trump donor at a exorbitant cost to the American taxpayer, exorbitant and tantamount to theft, because they're charging $775 per child per day, and yet soap isn't provided, and meals of noodles and burritos have been delivered in inadequately thawed capacities, which has led to multiple instances of food poisoning that have been documented and reported on by the ACLU. So if you think that, well, then, Peter, you're saying you don't think that there'll be mass graves for migrants who suffer from coronavirus. Do you think that they will be getting access to ventilators when American patients are being excluded from hospitals past a certain age? Do you think it's likely that any detained migrants, any migrants will have access to ventilators or respirators? Do you think that? Do you think there will be even one migrant detained in a prison center who will have access to a ventilator, even one? And do you think that it's likely to be 20% of people with severe cases in the cramped conditions. I'll remind you that Anne Frank died of typhus in one of the many concentration camps run and organized by Nazis, and that she didn't need to be executed or perish in a gas chamber, that she died of typhus, which was a disease at that time that was prevalent in cramped conditions, particularly when undernourishment was rampant and hygiene was an underattended principle. So yes, there's likely to be mass pits for bodies or crematoriums, bodies transported in military vehicles, etc., for dumping en masse. Yes, and I did hear that Harvey Weinstein already got COVID in jail. He's tested, presumably because he's a celebrity. Celebrities, as you will have seen, get early access to testing, but that means that COVID-19 is probably already widely prevalent in American prisons. Iran released prisoners from jail for non-violent offences because they knew it was essentially a death sentence to remain in jail. But Trump is so callous about human life that he may not sign off on any such measure. And who knows if state governors will take it in their hands to preserve people's lives by allowing non-violent offenders to return to their homes. So thank you for listening, everybody. I'm going to go. Enjoy your days. Please stay home. Remember that between 50 to 80% of people affected with COVID-19 are asymptomatic or have mild symptoms only. So you can still be a carrier and not know you have the disease. People are much safer the more that social interaction is reduced. So please don't go to the gym. Please don't go to cafes. Please stay home and work on your public advocacy. Work on making signs that you can hold up, take pictures of, and use social media to its best capacity to create public pressure on the government to begin ordering more masks, to begin ordering more gowns, the protective gear that hospital workers and health workers need to not become focal points for disease transmission within the hospital setting, as well as preserving their own safety and the safety of their families. And please also seek to put pressure on the administration to build and buy more ventilators. And think of hashtags, think of strategies. That's all. I deputize you all to do that. You are all of you are deputies in this fight. And it's not just a fight against a virus, it's a fight against corruption, inaction, and delay, and murderous levels of complacency. Thank you so much, everybody. Take care of yourselves and each other. Bye.